What's good, YouTube? Just a casual nerd back again with another video, and it's actually going to be MCU related again. I want to talk about Daredevil, since he was featured in the most recent She-Hulk episode, which is episode 8. And there's been a lot of talk about She-Hulk butchering characters. So a lot of the Netflix fans who was fan of Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, and that fourth character who will not be named, we were worried about whether She-Hulk was going to also butcher Daredevil, because we take a look at Abomination last week. Abomination has basically been castrated in the MCU at this point, so I want to talk about Daredevil in particular and what I thought about his portrayal in this She-Hulk episode. Now, I will admit, I don't think they butchered Matt Murdock in this episode. There's some things I didn't quite like, but I don't think they butchered him to the extent of some other characters that they've done. Some things that I did actually like was that, first of all, they didn't, dumb him down or make him dumber. Like, he was still a very intelligent lawyer. He had a lot of class, especially in the courtroom. He actually was basically really the reason why this court scene was actually watchable. And I'm like, they really should have been taking cues from the Daredevil show and other, lawyer-esque shows. Even though I know this is supposed to be a lighthearted comedy, but these court episodes have been just really, really bad. But this one was actually, watchable. It kind of, made sense. The whole aspect of, the leapfrog guy, it made sense. And he actually came with, a good defense and all that stuff. I think he made it very solid. I wish that, the lawyer aspect of the show they would took more care of it, or just hire better writers to write that aspect of the show. But yeah, I'm really happy that I know Matt Murdock, he is a man in the show, so I'm glad that they just didn't make him dumb or aloof. So I appreciate them for doing that. When it comes to the actual Daredevil part, I liked I'm still a fan of the red Daredevil suit. This one wasn't bad. It's just the same thing with the yellow. I still prefer the red personally, but it wasn't bad. It still fits in the universe, in both universes really. I like that they did give him a little bit more acrobatic skill, a little bit of CGI to improve on the acrobat. So I think they did pretty good. I think the same thing they're doing with Kingpin, they did with Kingpin and Hawkeye, how they basically made him a little stronger. They're doing the same thing with Daredevil. They're kind of giving him a little bit of a boost in their strength to be able to function in the MCU, but still, stay loyal to the actual character. Now, I will admit, some parts of it did look a little wonky, like when his movement, you can just kind of tell that it wasn't natural movement. So hopefully in his show, they'll be improved upon. I don't know. It is Disney's there. Hit or miss at this point in time. I don't think they're just putting as much emphasis on CGI for their shows. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's a little wanky. The same thing with this one, that I did like that he was a little bit more acrobatic. Just the movement, it wasn't as flowy as it could have been. But for the most part, most of the shots, it was nice. He had a pretty good fight scene as well. I guess that's to say the brutality of how he fights, it still, for the most part, seems to remain intact, and they just added a little bit more acrobats to it. So I think in those parts of it, they did do a good job. And it probably actually made this particular episode one of the most watchable episodes of the show. I know they weren't trying to quote unquote focus on cameos, but let's be honest, cameos is the only thing that's make some of these episodes watchable. Most of these episodes to me are just like, I'm gonna do a whole review of She-Hulk later after the finale, but most of the episodes are just bad. This one was actually pretty watchable, and yes, unfortunately they did have to lean on Daredevil for that. So yeah, that is what it is. Yeah, that part is what it is. And I have to admit, the chemistry between Matt and Jen, it wasn't as cringe as I thought it was gonna be. There was still a little cringe in there because it's a 30-minute show and they are developing this quick relationship. So it was still a little forced, a little cringe, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. They had a little bit of chemistry. In a lot of other episodes, it just seemed like where it comes to Jen, these other characters, it just is a whole bunch of cringe. But I like that Daredevil, he got to still kind of be himself and not just suck up to Jen. I think there's been a problem with all the other men who are quote unquote compatible. They were just sucking up, and that was basically it. So he kind of kept he's still bravado. he kind of still kept that Matt Murdock's swag from the Netflix adaptation. So I think they did solid on those points. Now I will say he's not quite as brooding as he was in the Netflix adaptation. For better or worse, that's still yet to be seen for me. Because I will say, I mean, it wasn't too bad, too awful in this episode. But I will say some of the lighthearted parts, some of the jokes for me just did not land. And it's not that I don't think, hey, Daredevil should not tell jokes or he should not joke at all. Because in the Netflix adaptation, most of it was pretty dark and brooding, but the jokes that they did, the little jokes that they did have, it was in line with the context of the dialogue and everything, and it was written well, so it wasn't a shoving it down our throats or anything like that. It just makes sense within the dialogue. In the She-Hulk, the jokes that he was saying, yes, it did fit within context, and it did make sense. But I just think in the writing department for these shows, I just feel like it's their first time, almost like akin to someone's first time doing stand up. And a lot of jokes is just not landing. So for me, it's not a problem of that he has jokes. It's the problem is that they're not written well, and he kind of flips sometimes from kind of being dark and then being very like light with these jokes. They could have did a better job of meshing the two together. Like when he first, when She-Hulk first arrived on the scene with the leapfrog guy, whatever. He was like, I'm probably gonna mess it up. He was like, you shouldn't be here or something like that. And it was kind of, reminiscent of the Netflix Daredevil that we know. And then a couple moments later, they were, of course, they had to throw in those jokes about him being blind and the echolocation thing on how he uses his, his heightened abilities. So yeah, of course, they did have to add that in. So yeah, my main thing, it just comes down to the ability to actually write good comedy, because you can have a brooding character and still write some comedic lines or write things that are funny for them. But I think the writers of the show in general, I don't think this show's been funny at all. So all right, going into this, I didn't expect it to be funny, and it still kind of wasn't. Wasn't funny. But just talking about, I'm gonna try to focus this on the Daredevil aspect of it. Well, I'll give my overall thoughts on it. I didn't hate it. I know some people are gonna hate it, for the jokes and then for their, their scene at the end and his walk of shame. Yeah, they did still have some corny parts. I'm not gonna lie to you, but I don't think they butchered him like they have done some other characters. Like I haven't like how they portray Hulk or Abomination or a couple other characters, simply on the basis that they're just men existing in the show. But I don't think they did that treatment to him as much, or I guess at all, as they did with a lot of other male characters. They didn't butcher him for the sake of him simply being a man. So I can appreciate that they at least did that with Daredevil's character. So that's why I say I don't hate the portrayal. It does show some potential. Like I said, they did up the acrobat, which I thought was a nice touch. They did still show that he's a very competent lawyer, which makes me wish they kind of made She-Hulk a little bit more of a competent lawyer. She's supposed to be a lawyer of the year, so having her make these simple mistakes just kind of takes me out of it, because I'm like, okay, she's supposed to be a great lawyer, and well, I digress. I'm supposed to be talking about Daredevil, but yeah. So in the right hands, the Daredevil show could potentially be good, just from what I've seen in the right hands. But Disney Plus doesn't really have a good track record for their shows, in my opinion, for the MCU. So does it raise my hopes for it? Not necessarily. I'm always gonna keep my hopes for that show pretty measured. I'm just glad to see they didn't totally butcher him in this episode. Like I said, was it the greatest portrayal? No. Was it? Did he make it this episode watchable? I would say yeah. Was it a great episode? I won't say great, but you're kind of comparing it to the very bottom. So yeah, it's kind of easy to be at least decent at this point in the game. I don't think this episode was save the show or anything, but he did at least make a good watchable episode, I think, in my opinion, at least. But what do you guys think about it? If you watched it, what do you think about his portrayal? Do you think it's do you think his portrayal was a betrayal of the Netflix adaptation, or you think they did a good job, or you're kind of just in the middle? Some parts was good, some parts are bad. But where are you listening to me for anyway? I'm a casual. Cue the outro.